Hello everybody, welcome back to this commentary series where we will be discussing and analyzing part 3 of Attack of the Clones. In our last commentary video, we ended where Jar Jar started to feel the pressure of having to make a difficult decision whether or not to give Palpatine emergency powers in the Senate. We are here on Geonosis, and the architecture for Geonosis was influenced by termite dwellings, and the person who was responsible for these kinds of designs was Doug Chiang, who was the art/design director for this movie as well as The Phantom Menace. So what they did was they took the designs of the termite dwellings and exaggerated the scale. We see Count Dooku entering one of the buildings and get a better look at the Geonosians and see more of them. As you can see, they are an insectoid species native to Geonosis. They bore a certain resemblance to B1 series battle droids, which they manufactured, as we saw earlier in the film. We see Obi-Wan being held as a prisoner and calls Dooku a traitor. Dooku sarcastically states, "Oh no, my friend, this is a mistake, a terrible mistake. They have gone too far. This is madness." Obi-Wan responds, "I thought you were the leader here, Dooku." Dooku responds, "This had nothing to do with me, I assure you. I will petition immediately to have you set free." Obi-Wan doesn't fall for Dooku's mind game and sarcastically states, "Well, I hope it doesn't take too long. I have work to do." Dooku walks around Obi-Wan and asks why he's on Geonosis. Obi-Wan tells him that he's been tracking a bounty hunter named Jango Fett and asks if he knows him. Dooku replies, "There are no bounty hunters here that I am aware of. The Geonosians don't trust them." Obi-Wan then says, "Who can blame them, but he is here, I can assure you. It's a great pity that our paths have never crossed before, Obi-Wan. Qui-Gon always spoke very highly of you," then pauses for a second and says, "I wish he were still alive. I could use his help right now." Trying to sound a little sympathetic, Obi-Wan says sternly, "Qui-Gon Jinn would never join you." Dooku responds, "Don't be so sure, my young Jedi. You forget that he was once my apprentice, just as you were once his. He knew all about the corruption in the Senate, but he would never have gone along with it if he had learned the truth as I have." Obi-Wan becomes curious and asks, "The truth?" Dooku replies, "The truth." Here we see Dooku actually confessing the truth to Obi-Wan. Take a look.
What if I told you that the Republic was now under the control of the Dark Lord of the Sith?
No, that's not possible. The Jedi would be aware of it.
The dark side of the Force has clouded their vision, my friend. Hundreds of senators are now under the influence of a Sith Lord called Darth Sidious.
I don't believe you.
So a couple things I want to point out here is that Dooku keeps circling around Obi-Wan, going in and out of shadows. This ultimately represents the perfect blend of truths, half-truths, and lies to try to manipulate Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan being held up in that blue force field depicts he and the rest of the Jedi being stuck and imprisoned in their Jedi ways. Now, let's continue the clip and discuss it further.
The Viceroy of the Trade Federation was once in league with this Darth Sidious. But he was betrayed 10 years ago by the Dark Lord. He came to me for help. He told me everything. You must join me, Obi-Wan. And together, we will destroy the Sith.
I will never join you, Dooku.
Now, Dooku here tweaks the truth just a little bit, where he talks about how the Viceroy came to him for help, and then tries to convince Obi-Wan to join him and destroy the Sith. We'll touch on this later towards the end of the film because I want you guys to see how the dots are connected. But anyway, the fact that Obi-Wan refuses to believe what Dooku is confessing exposes how the Jedi are complacent and overconfident with the state of the Republic and their code, which allows the dark side to cloud their judgment and blind them of the truth. In Return of the Jedi, Luke tells the Emperor that his overconfidence is his greatest weakness, and that holds true for the Jedi as well. There is now an imbalance in the Force, and that is caused by the dark side of the Force, and we see that it has clouded the Jedi's vision to the point where they are now at their most vulnerable point. We cut to the Senate and see a shot of the Senate building on a cloudy night. The darkness of night symbolizes how the inner darkness within the politicians come to surface to advocate for war, and the clouds represent how short-sighted this move is. They are blind to the consequences and have thought only with emotion. Mace Windu walks inside the Senate hearing as Jar Jar gives a speech. Jar Jar states how the Separatists and the Trade Federation made a pact and says that in response he proposes that the Senate give emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor immediately, and we see the Senate erupt with approval and chanting Palpatine's name. Palpatine stands up and states, "It is with great reluctance that I have agreed to this calling. I love democracy. I love the Republic." And we hear applause. "The power you give me, I will lay down when this crisis has abated." And we hear more applause. He continues, "And as my first act with this new authority, I will create a grand army of the Republic to counter the increasing threats of the Separatists." This scene obviously correlates to the rise of Hitler. Just to give you a brief history lesson following the Reichstag fire, which was an arson attack on the Reichstag building, home of the German parliament in Berlin, on Monday, February 27th, 1933. Precisely 4 weeks after Adolf Hitler was sworn in as Chancellor of Germany, the Nazis began to suspend civil liberties and eliminate political opposition. The communists were excluded from the Reichstag. At the March 1933 elections, no single party secured a majority. Hitler required the vote of the Center Party and conservatives in the Reichstag to obtain the powers he desired. He called on Reichstag members to vote for the Enabling Act, which was a law that gave the German cabinet, most importantly the Chancellor, the power to make and enforce laws without the involvement of the Reichstag or Weimar President Paul von Hindenburg on March 23, 1933. Hitler was granted plenary powers, quote-unquote, temporarily by the passage of the act. The law gave him the freedom to act without parliamentary consent and even without constitutional limitations. Employing his characteristic mix of negotiation and intimidation, Hitler offered the possibility of friendly cooperation, promising not to threaten the Reichstag, the president, the states, or the churches if granted the emergency powers. With Nazi paramilitary encircling the building, he said, "It is for you, gentlemen of the Reichstag, to decide between war and peace." The act allowed Hitler and his cabinet to rule by emergency decree for 4 years, but we all know that he ruled for much, much longer. Turning back to Attack of the Clones, Mace Windu says to Yoda, "It is done then. I will take what Jedi we have left and go to Geonosis and help Obi-Wan." Yoda states, "Visit I will the cloners on Kamino and see this army they have created for the Republic." And Mace Windu leaves the scene. We cut to Anakin and Padme heading towards Geonosis and land on some type of exhaust vent. Padme tells Anakin to follow her lead and that she's not interested in getting into a war and would rather find a diplomatic solution. Anakin tells her, "Don't worry, I've given up trying to argue with you." R2 starts to make noises and 3PO responds, "My obtuse little friend, if they had needed our help, they would have asked for it, You obviously have a great deal to learn about human behavior." 3PO and R2 never fail as comic relief characters. I always love their banter. The door opens for Padme and Anakin and they walk inside. We get more humorous banter between 3PO and R2, and ultimately R2 just leaves to go follow Padme and Anakin in case they need help. I just love how R2 just ends up losing his patience with 3PO, and 3PO just scrambles around and struggles to keep up. I mean, that's just classic Star Wars for you. Anakin and Padme continue to walk along the path, but we see Geonosians hidden within the walls. Anakin stops as he senses their presence. This idea of creatures being hidden and then attacking was inspired by the Rock people in Flash Gordon.
I thought this would be a fun little piece, fall back to the Rock people in Flash Gordon where they come out of the rocks. It's a little homage to that idea.
Padme falls onto the conveyor belt and Anakin goes after her. There's a lot going on in this scene in terms of imagery, foreshadow, and symbolism. I'm going to play the clip of this scene and we'll pause and discuss some of the important moments that happen.
Oh my goodness! Shut me down. Machines making machines?
The whole idea of the factory is an homage to Metropolis and modern times, and the common theme here is about the dehumanizing effects of the factory age and how it exploited workers. And you see that with Anakin and Padme being trapped in this dangerous environment. It is also drawing a parallel between how the clones are created like machines, just like the droid army. Lucas is showing that these are both two sides of the same coin.
Hopper first. I'm scrapped. It's a nightmare! Poor little R2. He's always getting himself into trouble. Uh-oh. I'm so confused.
We see Anakin's arm get trapped. This foreshadows what is about to happen to his arm later in the film, but more importantly, it foreshadows Anakin becoming more machine than man. Anakin being dragged along the conveyor belt is an homage to modern times, where the man gets dragged along the conveyor belt and swallowed by the machine, again furthering the theme of the dehumanization of factories and how they exploit the workers. In addition, the scene represents how Palpatine is able to exploit and control things and drag people along into a chaotic war, fought by machines, as the clones and the droids are, frankly, the same.
Not again. Obi-Wan's gonna kill me.
Now, throughout this scene, we see a lot of fire and hell imagery going on, as you see the red tint and the fire pouring inside the vats, foreshadowing what will happen to Anakin in the next film. In addition, the significance of Anakin's motivation in this scene is how he will descend into the depths of hell to save Padme, and in the next movie he does it again, but more figuratively and quite literally. Jango Fett arrives at the scene and captures Anakin. We cut to the Geonosis arena and see Anakin and Padme being chained up on a chariot-like carriage. Anakin tells her, "Don't be afraid." Padme turns to Anakin and says, "I'm not afraid to die. I've been dying a little bit each day since you came back into my life." Anakin gets all confused and asks, "What are you talking about?" And Padme confesses, saying, "I love you." Anakin is a little overwhelmed and says, "You love me? I thought we had decided not to fall in love. That we would be forced to live a lie and that it would destroy our lives." Padme tells him, "I think our lives are about to be destroyed anyway." And Padme looks deep into his eyes and moves closer to him and says, "I truly, deeply love you, and before we die I want you to know." Padme has now fully given in to her emotions, as she feels there is a high probability of them dying as they are being taken out into the arena for their execution, and she doesn't want to regret not telling him her true feelings for him. This is a great shot of the arena as you see all the Geonosians gathered around together to see the execution take place. Fun fact, the arena was built as a miniature and was made out of foam, so what we are seeing here is a shot of the miniature model of the arena, and it looks pretty remarkable, I'll say. Obi-Wan sees Anakin and Padme and seems unpleasantly surprised to see them. They get out of the carriage and Padme takes something out of her clothes and puts it in her mouth while being chained up to the pillar. Anakin walks over to be chained up to his pillar in between Obi-Wan and Padme. Now this is a funny moment between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Take a look.
I was beginning to wonder if you'd got my message.
I retransmitted it just as you had requested, Master. Then we decided to come and rescue you.
Good job.
That line never gets old. We then see the Geonosian leader, Dooku, Nute Gunray, and Lot Dod, and Jango and Boba Fett. The Geonosian leader's name is Pago the Lesser, and he is the Archduke of Geonosis, and as planetary leader of the Geonosians and a member of the Techno Union. Poggle controlled the vast droid factories found on his planet. To give you a little bit more lore about him, Poggle the Lesser was in power in 33 BBY. Darth Sidious's intentions became clear. He wanted control of the droid factories to supply B-1 series battle droids to the Trade Federation for an invasion of Naboo. Poggle, grateful for Sidious's help, gladly struck a deal with the Trade Federation. Shortly after the Trade Federation was defeated at the Battle of Naboo, Poggle was approached by the rogue Jedi Count Dooku and became partners, as we can see here and as we saw when they were together forming the Confederacy of Independent Systems with the rest of the Separatist Council. Poggle the Lesser announces, "Let the execution begin." We see one creature come out called a reek. Reeks are large, thick-skinned, horned, rhino-esque quadrupeds native to Elysia. Subspecies could be found on Iridonia, Kashyyyk, and Ithor. They could also be found in ranches on the Codian Moon, Tatooine, and Salakmai. The other one is called an Acklay. Acklays are non-sentient carnivores native to Vendaxa. Acklays had sharp claws and thick skin and averaged 3.05 meters tall. Due to these attributes as well as the species' ferocity, Acklays are often exported from Vendaxa to be used in gladiatorial combat. In addition to Vendaxa, these creatures can be found on Geonosis, as we see here, Lihan, and Felucia. The third and last one they bring out is called a Nexu. Nexu are feline creatures native to the chilly forests of the Indona continent on the planet of Chogana. There are other breeds of Nexu on Chogana's other continents, but only the forest Nexu had an additional set of eyes able to view in infrared wavelength, aided in their hunting of bark rats and tree-climbing octopi. They are often transported and trained as security beasts, as used for patrolling on Malastare, or used in arena combat as we see here on Geonosis. Nexu are generally 4.5 meters long and 1 meter tall. Anakin states the comedic line that we hear in each Star Wars film, "I've got a bad feeling about this." All three creatures move towards the prisoners. Padme is able to free herself. Obi-Wan tells Anakin, "Just relax, concentrate." Anakin asks, "What about Padme?" And Obi-Wan says, "She seems to be on top of things," and we see her on top of the pillar. For the rest of the scene, I'm going to play the highlights. This part right here is an homage to Mysterious Island. Lucas has stated, without Ray Harryhausen, there might be no Star Wars. Ray Harryhausen was someone who pushed the industry forward in special effects and became well known for his stop motion. Lucas at this time is pushing the technology forward with CGI, while also thanking the artists of the past for creating great works and paving the way for the future. Anakin and crew become surrounded by droidekas, and Dooku looks at them almost with pity. Then we see someone mysterious. Who could it be?
Master Windu, how pleasant of you to join us.
This party's over.
I mean, just pure badassery right there. Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu is a bad motherfucker, that's for sure. We see the Jedi come out and ignite their lightsabers. We see Ki-Adi-Mundi and Plo Koon and Aayla Secura in the back. Then Shakti and Luminara Indoli, Kit Fisto and Pablo Gil, he's part of the species called Angre, Barriss Offee and Agan Kalar, he's part of the species called Zaprak, like Maul, and Boltar Swan and Coleman Trebor, he's part of the species called Verk. Anakin and crew are very pleased to see the Jedi. Dooku tells Windu, "Brave, but foolish, my old Jedi friend. You are impossibly outnumbered." Windu scoffs at him and says, I don't think so. Dooku responds saying, we'll see. And Windu hears the super battle droids marching towards him, and this is where the Battle of Geonosis will begin, and it marks the beginning of the Clone Wars.
You call this a diplomatic solution?
No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
What are you doing? Oh, stop that! You're going to strain something. My neck! Oh, now where are you taking me? Oh, this is such a drag.
The thing about this and how the droids were so successful is not because they're more skilled than the Jedi or anything like that. The only way the droids can really win is by numbers, as you see here that the droids have an overwhelming majority over the Jedi. Dooku tells them to surrender so their lives can be spared. Windu rejects Dooku's offer and tells him that they will not be hostages to be bartered. Dooku responds saying, then, I'm sorry, old friend. And the droids point their weapons at the Jedi. Padme notices something above, and Yoda comes to the rescue with the clone army. And now the Clone Wars have really begun. We see Republic gunships destroying the droids. Yoda tells them to create a perimeter around the survivors, and we see more of the droids getting destroyed by gunships. We see a couple Star Destroyers alongside the gunships, furthering the foreshadow of what is to come of the Republic. C-3PO is all fixed and sits up and believes that what has occurred was a dream. Boba Fett picks up the helmet of his dead father, which motivates him to become a bounty hunter like his father in the future. Yoda points out that if Dooku escapes, rally more systems to his cause, he will. In other words, if we want to end this war now, we must capture Dooku. Anakin orders the pilot to aim right above the fuel cells. These are hard cell class interstellar transports, which were powered by a cluster of 6 primary thruster engines. The hard cell class did not use conventional repulsor lifts for flight, instead using rocket propulsion designed for atmospheric and stellar travel. The transport's drive motors were deployed to generate enough retro-rocket thrust to achieve vertical landings at speeds of up to 800 kilometers per hour. Much of the interior of Separatist-operated hard cell class transports was given up to storage of droid forces. A standard hard cell class transport could carry hundreds of Hailfire class tanks and missile ammunition in quick deployment rigs. Hard cell class transports were not designed for combat, though they were afforded meager protection with a ring of turret-mounted laser cannons around the fuselage and assault concussion missile launchers. In a battle situation, the most effective tactic for a hard cell class transport crew was to flee into hyperspace, utilizing the vessel's Class 1 hyperdrive to make a speedy retreat. So Anakin, having those shot down, not only was able to effectively destroy the droids, but also limit the droid army's resources. As Obi-Wan tells him, "Good call, my young Padawan." We see more of the battle. Dooku walks into the Separatist command center as the leaders are standing around the table displaying a holographic map of the battle. Gunray points out the fact that the Jedi have amassed a huge army. Dooku acts surprised and states, "That doesn't seem possible. How could the Jedi come up with an army so quickly?" Gunray wants to send all available droids into battle, but Dooku thinks there are too many clones for them to fight. Pago the Lesser tells them that their communications have been jammed. We see one gunship get shot down. Windu tells the pilot to land in the assembly area. Windu runs up to a clone commander, and the clone tells him that there are 5 commando units awaiting his orders. Clone commandos are elite clone troopers of the Grand Army of the Republic. Clones selected for the commando program were trained by Mandalorian drill sergeants that were recruited by Fett himself to train them to become the deadliest soldiers in the clone army. Often working in squads of 4, clone commandos were assigned to carry out special operations that the average clone trooper couldn't handle. And you see this mission of the clone commandos in the game called Republic Commando. Yoda orders the pilot to take him to the command center, and we get a cool view of the battle and awesome shots of it as well. Obi-Wan orders the pilot to attack the Federation ships. As you see, the clones do not hesitate. The clone commander tells Yoda that all forward positions are advancing, and Yoda is very pleased. We see an all-terrain tactical enforcer, ATTE, and more awesome shots of the battle. We cut back to the Separatist command center, and Gunray points out they're losing the battle. Lot Dodge says that they must get the starships back into space. Pago the Lesser tells Dooku that they must order a retreat. Dooku states, "My master will never allow the Republic to get away with this treachery." Pago tells Dooku that he's sending his warriors to hide in the catacombs, and adds that the Jedi must not find their designs of the ultimate weapon, which makes the audience infer that it is the Geonosians, led by Pago the Lesser, that are responsible for designing and building the Death Star. Dooku tells him that he will take the designs with him to Coruscant and give it to his master, and we get more awesome shots of the battle. We see the Neimoidians aboard their ship, which is a Shethapede-class transport shuttle, also known as the Neimoidian Shuttle, or the Separatist Shuttle. It is used by high-ranking officials of the Trade Federation to visit potential clients and marketplaces. They are shaped like soldier beetles, and their claw-foot landing legs could only settle down on hard surfaces. This was due to the businessmen's distaste for dealing with poor, underdeveloped worlds. These shuttles often have their cockpits removed and replaced by automated pilots so that cabin space could be increased. The personal shuttle of Trade Federation Viceroy Newt Gunray was named the Lapis Cutter. This ship had no weapons, although it was protected by powerful deflector shields. The Neimoidians leave, and we see Dooku ride a speeder bike. Right behind him are 2 Nantex-class territorial defense starfighters, also known as the Beak Wing Fighters, or simply the Geonosian Starfighters. It was a model of starfighter that was manufactured by Huplapasa Tisk Shipwrights Collective and designed for the exclusive use of the Geonosians when guarding Geonosis against intruders. We see more of the battle. Obi-Wan and Anakin notice Dooku in front of them. Anakin orders to shoot him down, but the pilot tells him that they are out of rockets. Padme thinks they need help, but Obi-Wan tells her that there isn't time and states, "Anakin and I can handle this." Dooku presses some buttons and tells his fighters to go behind and attack the gunship. The gunship gets hit, and Padme and the clone trooper fall out and land on the sand. Anakin screams her name as she falls down and orders to put the ship down. Obi-Wan rushes over to Anakin and tells him to not let his personal feelings get in the way, and tells the pilot to continue to follow the speeder. Anakin's mind is still on Padme and yells, "Lower the ship!" Obi-Wan confronts him saying, "I can't take Dooku alone. I need you. If we catch him, we can end this war right now. We have a job to do." Anakin replies, "I don't care. Put the ship down." Obi-Wan tells him, "You will be expelled from the Jedi Order." Anakin replies, "I can't leave her." Obi-Wan then says, "Come to your senses. What do you think Padme would do were she in your position?" Anakin thinks about what he is saying and says she would do her duty. Ultimately, he knows Padme well enough that she would do what's best for the greater good of society, while he lets his inner passionate emotions get the better of him. Yoda senses that a heated altercation took place. The clone commander tells Yoda that the droid army is in full retreat. Yoda says, "Well done, Commander. Bring me a ship." Dooku arrives at a hangar and the two Jedi follow him inside. The gunship is shot down as it attempts to fly away. We see Obi-Wan and Anakin catch up to Dooku. Anakin says, "You're gonna pay for all the Jedi that you killed today, Dooku." Obi-Wan tells Anakin, "We'll take him together." But Anakin impatiently says, "I'm taking him now," and runs after him. However, Dooku uses Force Lightning and throws him against the wall. Obi-Wan is now alone to face Dooku. They circle around each other, and Dooku says, "As you see, my Jedi powers are far beyond yours. Now, back down." Dooku uses Force Lightning against Obi-Wan, but Obi-Wan blocks it. Dooku ignites his lightsaber and they fight. We see an intercut of Anakin and Padme, showing that the two lovers have fallen in battle. A clone trooper comes over to help Padme and tells her that they should get back to the forward command ship. But Padme tells him no, and that they should gather what troops they can and get to the hangar and help capture Dooku. They continue fighting while Anakin is on the ground in pain. Dooku is practically toying with Obi-Wan at this point, as you see the smile on his face, and slashes his arm and leg. Dooku waves his lightsaber around to prepare for a final blow. Anakin leaps into the air and clashes with Dooku, and they have a little banter as Dooku says, "Brave of you, boy, but I would have thought you had learned your lesson." Anakin responds, "I am a slow learner." During this banter, Obi-Wan uses the Force to pull his lightsaber towards him, and then he throws it to Anakin and they fight. Here we see lightsabers used as a light source for fighting. But more importantly, Lucas talked about this sequence being more of a visual idea more than an action fighting idea. Now, let's break this sequence down because there's very meaningful stuff here at play. Lucas talked about this sequence being like a tone poem, which is where the plot and characters take a back seat and the metaphor and symbolism are what the audience needs to pay attention to. At first, we see the blue lightsaber shine on Anakin's face. Then as Dooku's lightsaber comes in and Anakin's face is red, then purple, and blue, and purple. Then cut to Dooku, red, and shadowy black. Cut to Anakin, blue, purple, red. Dooku, red, black. Anakin, blue, and red. Dooku, red and black. Anakin, blue, red, purple. Dooku, same thing, red and shadowy black. Anakin, blue and red. Now, what is the point of all this? Lucas is playing with color to show the inner turmoil happening with Anakin. Throughout the movie, we see that Anakin's emotions are all over the place. He goes and slaughters a bunch of Tusken Raiders, yet later confesses that he knew what he did was wrong, as he said, "I'm a Jedi. I know I'm better than this." Anakin is really struggling in finding balance, and this is just another way of Lucas showing us this, but in a more unique, cinematic way. The red we see with Dooku is that he is aligned with the Sith and the dark side of the Force, and the black is depicting the secrets that he holds. He knows more than Anakin and the Jedi. Later on in the film, we see those secrets be revealed. They continue fighting and Anakin gets his arm cut off and Dooku force pushes him to the ground. The same arm that got trapped while he was on the conveyor belt. Yoda comes into the scene and confronts Dooku, and here they challenge each other using the Force. Yoda tells him, "Powerful you have become, Dooku. The dark side I sense in you." Dooku says to Yoda, "I've become more powerful than any Jedi, even you," and uses Force Lightning on him. And Yoda catches it and throws it back at him. Dooku stops it and it bounces onto the ceiling. Dooku uses the lightning again, but Yoda is able to hold it off, and Yoda gives a one-liner, "Much to learn, you still have. Dooku states, "It is obvious that this contest cannot be decided by our knowledge of the Force, but by our skills with a lightsaber," and they fight.
Fought well you have, my old Padawan.
As Dooku runs away, Yoda uses the Force to grab the pillar falling down on Anakin and Obi-Wan and places it right behind them. Yoda is a little disheartened at what took place. Padme and a few clones arrive at the hangar and see Dooku's ship leave, and they try to shoot it down. But Dooku knows their shots won't do anything and just relaxes. The droid that pilots the ship is an FA-4 pilot droid. This ship is called Dooku's Solar Sailor. This vessel is a yacht that has a unique mix of Geonosian engineering and pre-Republic Gree technology. We cut back to Yoda and crew, and we see Padme run over to give Anakin a hug. We cut back to Dooku's Solar Sailor. As you see, this is the most unique part of the ship. This sail had no discernible power source. This made the craft especially difficult to track through hyperspace, allowing it to get to and from highly guarded planets such as Coruscant undetected. Dooku's sail was composed of an exotic matter that reflected otherwise undetectable supralight emissions and achieved great performance across the entire galaxy with a much smaller diameter than most sails. We see Dooku arrive in this red-tinted industrial hell covered in smoke called the Works. What's important to note is the color tint throughout the movie, as it starts from a pastel blue, then to deep blue, then orange, then now red. And in the middle, we've got Tatooine, which is a neutral yellow, which splits the movie into two halves. The movie begins with a mysterious tone, but then leads to a tragic resolution as galactic war has officially begun. Dooku lands inside one of the buildings and meets with his master, Darth Sidious. We learn that Dooku and Tyrannus are one and the same, and that they've orchestrated this war together. Also, this is where we connect the dots on the Viceroy, and that Dooku states how the Viceroy came to Dooku for help. What makes that part not entirely true is that Dooku says this to Obi-Wan as if he's not in league with the Sith or Sidious, and that he's his own man trying to destroy the Sith without being a Jedi. But the truth is that he's a pawn of Sidious. He simply takes orders from his master. This is all part of Sidious's scheme to try and create a war. Dooku plays more of the diplomat and negotiator, unlike Maul, who is a pure assassin. Dooku managed to fool the Trade Federation to think that he's not with Sidious and just a man who wants to fight the corruption in the Republic Senate. Or was that a lie, and the Trade Federation is still in line with Sidious? That question will be answered in the next movie. We cut to the Jedi Temple and see Obi-Wan and Windu watch the sunset. Obi-Wan begins to speak. Do you believe what Count Dooku said about Sidious controlling the Senate? It doesn't feel right. Yoda chimes in, join the dark side. Dooku has. Lies, deceit, creating mistrust are his ways now. Windu speaks up. Nevertheless, I feel we should keep a closer eye on the Senate. And Yoda agrees. They don't want to admit that Dooku is right because they feel they can't trust Dooku since he's joined the dark side, but at the same time they try to still take precaution. But that also means they lost a little bit of trust in the Senate. Ultimately, Sidious and Dooku won, and the Jedi are all but guessing at this point. Also notice the orange in the sky and the clouds. Lucas is reminding us of the battle that took place on Geonosis, because he's visually telling us that the galaxy and the Jedi have been blinded by the war. They don't see the enemy right in front of them. Windu asks Obi-Wan where Anakin is, and Obi-Wan replies, on his way to Naboo, escorting Senator Amidala home. Then he adds, I have to admit that without the clones, it would not have been a victory. Yoda says alarmingly, Victory? Victory, you say? Master Obi-Wan, not victory. The shroud of the dark side has fallen. Begun, the Clone War has. Then it cuts to the clone army. The way it's shot is a reference to Triumph of the Will, which is a 1935 German Nazi propaganda film. Take a look. You also hear the Imperial March theme, which is an obvious foreshadow of what will happen to the Republic. This is where Sidious wins and fools the whole galaxy. Then we get an intercut of Anakin and Padme's wedding. Anakin reaches his mechanical hand to Padme's, and they both kiss as they are now married and deeply in love with each other. 3PO and R2 are witnesses of the marriage, and the film ends with the newlyweds looking out towards the sky. But this sky is very cloudy. The juxtaposition between Palpatine watching the clones march and Anakin and Padme's wedding is quite fascinating. It's showing us that blind optimism is what dooms the galaxy. Anakin, Padme, and the rest of the Republic believe they will win this war, but the clouds hide the reality of the future. That is the end of Attack of the Clones. I hope you enjoyed it. More videos are on the way, including the next commentary video where we will be going over Revenge of the Sith. Make sure to subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment. And may the Force be with you.